life is lived outside therapy. So, what do I mean by that? So, obviously, therapy is an important part of your growth and development and like self reflection, right? Therapy is an important part of an examined life. We know that. Um, but, and you don't live in therapy. Therapy is an hour a week, an hour a fortnight, an hour a month. The real work's done like in your life. So something that I think about for I guess my personal life, but also my professional life when I'm like working with clients is how how is what we are talking about and what are we working through, like how is that going to translate into your life? So the questions that I'm asking are, how can you take this insight and implement it into your life? How can you take this kind of this discovery or this experience and kind of live from that place? Because I think one thing that I see in my work today, um, and I think the reason I see it is because I did it and do it still guilty of it, is that um, you know I sometimes see, or less so now. I think I used to see therapy as like this hour in my week or fortnight where I could go and kind of just get like kind of smoke blown up my ass, essentially. I could sort of just go and feel good because obviously your therapist is on your side. Um, and maybe, I think maybe I knew what to say. I think I know what to say to get a therapist to, give me positive feedback or like sort of reinforce strengths or positive qualities of myself. I can do that, and that's a way for me to avoid the work of actually talking about the difficult things. Um, and that means that I don't have to actually do the difficult work in my own life. And so, what I'm trying to do now, I guess, in my own therapy is go there, like go to the place that I don't want to go to. Um, and look, I don't think I always do that. Like I don't always do that. I think it's kind of it's hard for a reason. Like, hard work is hard. It feels way better to just keep it light. Um, but I think when I choose the light work, nothing happens. Nothing happens in my life. Nothing changes. I'm just out of I'm just out of pocket some money that I pay to a therapist, and there's no actual change. And so that kind of informs, I guess, my professional work. Where I am constantly asking clients about, like, first of all, like, is this what you want to focus on this session? Is this is this what's in the way? Um, and if so, like, potentially, like, how would talking about this support you? I'm kind of like, I think in my practice, I'm sort of developing like this. Like I guess I see therapy as kind of like, I guess, like threading a needle sometimes. But I also think, like, you can't just, sometimes you need that kind of like a more direct approach. Sometimes you kind of need to be a needle and thread, and sometimes you need to be a bit of a hammer. And that doesn't mean you just like smash the nail, but you just have a bit more of a direct approach. And so I think I started off really like client-centered, person-centered, Rogerian, but my practice, in the residential rehab setting has kind of shown me the benefits of having a bit more of a direct approach sometimes, like asking the question. And you know what, like, as I mentioned before, like my own experience as a client, like my own avoidant tendency, my own, I guess, yeah, manipulative behavior, like my own sort of, yeah, desire to sort of avoid. Yeah. And so I think, like, I find this work just like so sort of overlapping with the personal and the professional. My experience as a client informs my practice as a professional so much. And I think if your therapist isn't in therapy, I think that's a red flag to me. Like, if I'm honest, like, how can you lead someone down a path that you haven't walked? Um, it's just not, it doesn't make sense to me. So, um, I'm still like, every time I do like my own supervision with my supervisor, it's meant to be about like the clinical work, but like so much of my own personal process is woven into it. So, like when I say life is lived outside of therapy, that actually kind of feels more informed by my own personal life. And that's something I've taken into my professional work. And I think it's landed, and it makes a lot of sense, like in the setting I'm in, it's residential, so people stay there, right? So they live at the facility for a certain amount of time while they're getting treatment, and it's comfortable, and it's a good environment, it's a safe environment. The world isn't always like that, and so the hard thing about that kind of work is like, yes, you're safe and soothed and your needs are met in this environment and you feel great, you don't have cravings, like obviously, like you're in this environment, why would you want to, there's nothing to escape, right? But how is your experience here gonna translate into the world, into life where there's rent and bills and appointments and social life, partners, husbands, wives, kids, like all of that stuff, like how's it gonna translate? How are you gonna integrate it? And I think that's kind of something that I've been thinking about is that like integration piece, which is, I guess, the process from therapy into life. It's taking the therapeutic growth and development and actually living it, because life is lived outside therapy. And it's hard. It's hard. I think I spent a good few years going to therapy and saying like, yeah, I'm struggling with this, and yeah, it reminds me of, how my parents did this or that to me, and how I didn't have this or that. And I think I just kind of like went around in that circle, and just lived sort of my victimhood over and over again, and nothing changed really. I think maybe, reflecting on it, like if I'm to kind of still man, that time of therapy for me, I would say I'd probably say maybe I was learning how to tell my story and how to relate to my story. And kind of like learning how to inhabit the therapeutic space as a client. And so there is value to that. There is value to that. But like I guess the clients that I work with in a residential setting, like they're only with us for 6 months max. And that sounds like a long time, but in terms of like the work of therapy, I feel like it can take like a year to like get comfortable with a therapist, to to establish that safety, to sort of stabilize, and then do the processing work. So it's, I think you want to be thinking about in therapy, like how can I apply this in this next week or next 2 weeks? How can I how can I kind of use this to grow, use this to change? Because therapy is like a real short sort of minute of your life, and I think that's almost like another thing too. I used to sort of, I think I used to do a lot more weekly sessions. Now I'm kind of like fortnightly is the shortest amount of time I do. It's kind of partly financial because it's, therapy's expensive. I actually can't really, like I could pay for it weekly, but it just wouldn't really, it'd be too tight, like there's a financial sort of consideration, but there's also like, like me doing the work consideration. So I think when I use therapy more regularly, it would be to just kind of make me feel good about myself a bit more. And because I wasn't actually developing any skills or working on really working on myself outside of therapy, I was almost dependent on that space, dependent on that hour each week. And so, I would encourage people to kind of play with the amount of time in between sessions. weekly isn't necessarily better. You know, I think there was a time that I really like. I think I really fed my ego when I could say I go to therapy weekly. You know, like I think it was like virtue signaling to other people that, like, you know, I'm working on myself and I'm self-reflective and I'm trying to grow and like I'm smart and I'm, you know, that kind of guy. When like I don't think that's what that communicates now. Um, yeah, and I kind of I saw a clip the other day where a person was talking about how they did weekly therapy for 10 sessions, weekly therapy for 10 years, and you know, immediately like that's kind of what triggered this like line of thought for me. I was like, what did you do? Like, what did you do in 10 years? Like, what? Yeah, like if like if you're doing the work in therapy, do you need to do it weekly for 10 years? And maybe you know what? Maybe I haven't experienced that kind of therapy. That is so amazing that you want to go every week for 10 years. Um, I definitely don't have the finances to support that, but yeah, I just think like I'm really enjoying having a bit more time between sessions. Like 2, 3, 4 weeks. I even had a like maybe like 6 weeks to a couple months between my last session and the session before that. Just because my counselor therapist had something come up for them. So they had to cancel a session, and I said, it's all right, I'll kind of get to you. Yeah, we'll figure it out. But I was kind of really ready for that session. I was like, I need to kind of talk about this thing. And then when, you know, it got cancelled, and it immediately sort of shifted my perspective to, okay, I don't have this session to run to. Like, I don't have that island, you know, in the ocean. How do I keep, you know, swimming? And it was I had a really positive experience of just sort of sitting with what was and reflecting and grounding with my practices. And so, yeah, that's kind of, you know, that's been part of this whole like thread for me, you know, of like trying to do it, trying to live it, you know, and not just trying to receive this service once, you know, a fortnight, once every few weeks, but actually like having therapy complement the work that I'm doing in my own life, you know, like having it be a space that I come back to with like all the data of the last few weeks and how I've been holding myself and how I've been regulating and how I've been working through what we've been talking about. Um, yeah, and you know what? It's taken me this long to get to this point. So, you know, if you're just starting out in therapy, you know, maybe a weekly might work. I think if if I guess I'm just saying what would have helped me when I started my therapy journey, because there's like I think it's a bit vague and like kind of unclear around like, you know, how often do you see a therapist? Like what do you like, you know, what do you do? How do you do you do it forever? And I think some people just do it to get through certain issues and things in their life, and I think that's that is valid. Personally, I think I like having that space to reflect, because it's a different type of reflection to my journaling or my other practices, where I'm holding my mind and my body in my head, in my head, or thinking about it, or feeling it. So I think I will always do therapy, but I don't think it'll be like this thing that I do to make myself feel better per se, but it's more like an opportunity to reflect, to be witnessed, be seen, be heard, be felt. And I'm really seeing that as therapy for me right now. So yeah. So yeah, I think I want to say don't try not to use therapy as your crutch. Try not to use it as this place where you go each week and you just feel good, right? I think being seen and being heard and working through things can feel good, but be conscious of whether you're feeling good because you're doing the work, or you're feeling good because you're avoiding the work. Because I know I've spent a lot of time avoiding the work. And I'm not really incentivized to say this, I'm a counselor and I'm a psychotherapist. So, what I'm saying would mean my clients would see me less regularly, but I think that would be better for them. I think that would be better for. I think it'd be better for everyone to not be dependent on a therapist, consistently dependent. I think if my therapist retired or stopped practicing, and I've thought about this because it's happened to a friend of mine, I'd feel comfortable looking for someone else, because I know what the work is. I know what the work is now, and I think I'm at a point in my own journey as a client where I'd be comfortable to leave a therapist if it didn't work out. The therapist I'm seeing now, I'm seeing them because I left my previous therapist. That just wasn't the right fit, and therapy's all about fit. It's all about that connection, whether you can kind of understand each other's language, whether you speak the same language. I think you kind of got to speak the same language, and not you got to both speak English, but you got to both have a similar sort of frame of the world, or if not, you've got to like your therapist's frame of the world and be wanting that, because that's the that's going to be the framework through which your work occurs. So there needs to be like alignment on some level around that, I think. There's just so much. There's so much more I want to say, but I feel like I've already kind of gone way off from like living life outside of therapy. Yeah. Let's leave it there because no, and everything else I'm thinking of can be another video. But yeah, like life is lived outside of therapy. Life is lived in the world. When you're in therapy, be thinking about like, okay, and how does this translate into the real world? How does this translate into my life? How does this impact the issues that I'm having, like the things that I'm working on? Like, how do I grow outside this room from what happens within this room? I wish I wish I knew that earlier, but I couldn't have known it earlier. So maybe this video is pointless. But yeah, that's just what I'm thinking. So I hope you find this helpful. And yeah, one day at a time, brick by brick, I would say, what would I say to close this out? I don't know. I wish I had something really cool to say to end this, but I don't. I will just say that, unexamined life is not worth living, right? But the examined life is like the hardest thing you'll ever do. So, the pain of not living or the pain of living, it's going to be hard either way. I reckon. Oh, that's where I'm at the moment. Like, I'm really like, life is hard. Like, trying to live into life is hard. Working through your shit is hard. Like, I just want to normalize that because, I feel like society is just about feeling good. Anyway, I'm going to stop there. You do you.